My 30 Farad's autistic next-door neighbor 30M will not leave me alone. How do I make him stop? You moved back to your childhood home after years away, and while you were initially excited, it soon became apparent that your next-door neighbor was going to be a challenge. He's a 30-year-old man with autism who lives with his parents, and from almost the day you returned, he began trying to interact with you in ways that felt intense and, over time, invasive. His frequent knocking, attempts to look in through your windows, and even his behavior around the yard created an environment that made it hard for you to relax in your own space. It started with small things, like a quick hello if you were both outside, which seemed innocent enough, even if a little more frequent than you'd like. But as the days went on, it became clear he was looking for much more interaction. One of the first red flags was when he began using a small gap in the fence to enter your backyard. He would wander in regularly to look for you, seeming to disregard that your dog, who's protective of the yard, was visibly distressed by his presence. You tried to be polite, especially since he didn't seem malicious, just overly eager. But the situation quickly grew more intense. When you and your boyfriend finally patched up the gap in the fence, hoping it would solve the issue, he was visibly upset, acting as though the fix was a personal slight. A few weeks later, while you were outside with your dog, he approached you directly, asking you to walk with him. Caught off guard, you made an excuse to avoid going, heading back inside. But even after you closed the door, he lingered by your gate for about 10 minutes, waiting for you to come back out. You could hear him occasionally talking to himself or sighing, as if frustrated. Eventually, he saw your boyfriend and asked him to get you to come out. Your boyfriend tried to explain that you were busy, but the neighbor argued, growing insistent and saying that you had to come out. Feeling trapped, you eventually agreed to go on a short walk with him, feeling awkward and uncomfortable, but hoping it would help him move on. Unfortunately, this act of kindness seemed to reinforce his behavior. Just days later, he tried the same thing again. This time, he ignored your boyfriend's explanation that you weren't available and simply waited outside your gate until you felt compelled to go out and address it directly. You walked with him briefly, trying to tell him that you were busy and couldn't hang out with him every time he came over, hoping he would take the hint. He looked hurt but nodded, and you hoped that would be the end of it. But each time you tried to set boundaries, he became visibly upset, and you were left feeling guilty, wondering if you were being too harsh or if you had accidentally encouraged him by agreeing to his requests. Recently, the problem reached a new level. One morning, you were taking a shower and heard your dog barking non-stop for 20 to 30 minutes. When you finally came out to see what was going on, you saw that he had been knocking on your door the entire time, seemingly oblivious to the fact that no one was answering. He waited, unbothered by your dog's frantic barking, until you were left feeling both frustrated and unsettled. Your boyfriend, who spends a lot of time working in the backyard, is frequently interrupted by him as well. The neighbor regularly asks him to go get you and becomes irritated when your boyfriend tries to explain that you're busy or don't want to come outside. His persistence never seems to waver, and it feels like he's singled you out, as you've noticed that he only stops other neighbors for a brief greeting, rarely if ever pressing them for anything more. In addition to seeking you out at every opportunity, he's begun insisting on physical contact, often hugging you whenever you do encounter him. You've tried to move away or explain that you'd prefer not to hug, but he either doesn't understand or doesn't want to accept it. None of the other neighbors seem to experience this level of attention, which only makes the situation feel more isolating and awkward. Now, with Halloween approaching, you're conflicted about what to do. You had planned to pass out candy on your porch, but are dreading the idea that he'll see this as an opportunity to hang around for hours. You've even considered skipping Halloween activities altogether to avoid the potential confrontation. Despite your best efforts to be polite and understanding, it's becoming impossible to enjoy even the simple parts of living in your own home. You don't want to cut him off completely, especially since he seems lonely, but you also can't keep putting your own comfort aside. His parents are aware of his behavior. They've seen him come over, and you've tried to subtly bring it up, but they don't seem interested in addressing it directly. His mother, who you find a bit abrasive, has even given you cold looks when you've brought it up. Caught between his unyielding attention and his parents' apparent indifference, you feel like your only option is to take a more assertive stance, which you've been avoiding in an attempt to keep the peace. Ida for refusing to invite my brother's fiancée to my wedding because of her Instagram account? Your wedding day should be a celebration of you and Jake, filled with the people you love and free of distractions or discomforts. For months, you've been eagerly planning every detail, hoping for an intimate, family-focused event. But since your brother's fiancée, Amber, became involved, you've felt increasingly uneasy. Amber has been growing her Instagram following through fitness modeling, and while you've got nothing against her career, her online presence has a way of spilling over into family gatherings. At your engagement party, Amber showed up in a tight mini dress, spent much of the evening live streaming, and interacted with her followers right in the middle of the event. You felt uncomfortable, especially as some comments from her followers veered into uncomfortable territory, treating what should have been an intimate family gathering as public entertainment. You held your tongue at the time, hoping that if you ignored it, maybe it would be a one-time thing. However, knowing she could be broadcasting parts of your wedding day for her own content has made you more and more uncomfortable, especially since you don't want your special moments online. When you decided to address it directly, you approached Amber privately and respectfully. You asked her if she'd be willing to refrain from live streaming or posting about the wedding, explaining that you wanted to keep it personal and private. To your disappointment, she brushed you off and said that social media is part of her brand and, therefore, an extension of who she is. Amber's dismissal of your request left you with a knot in your stomach. You felt she was more interested in preserving her brand than respecting your wishes for privacy on what is arguably one of the biggest days of your life. Left feeling unheard and frustrated, you decided to approach your brother. You explained your concerns, hoping he'd understand where you were coming from. But instead, he was furious, accusing you of being judgmental and not accepting Amber for who she is. He argued that her career isn't just a phase, it's part of her identity, and by excluding her, you'd essentially be excluding him. He went on to say that if she wasn't invited, he'd likely skip the wedding altogether, which left you stunned. This wasn't just about one guest anymore, It was about the potential of losing your brother's support on your wedding day. Since then, the situation has escalated. Word has gotten around, and now other family members are getting involved, many of them siding with your brother. They believe that by singling Amber out, you're being unfair or even snobbish, while you feel that you're only asking for respect on your wedding day. Jake supports you, but he's understandably worried about the rift this might create in your family, one that could be hard to repair. At this point, it's not even about Amber's Instagram, as much as it's about feeling like your wishes for one special day are being pushed aside. You feel like no one is acknowledging that for you, this day is about family, love, and privacy, not a backdrop for someone else's online life. Now, you're left with a dilemma. Should you cave and allow Amber to attend, even if it means potentially seeing your wedding as a backdrop for her followers? Or do you stick to your values, even if it risks damaging your relationship with your brother? With so many opinions swirling around and emotions running high, it's left you second-guessing yourself. You wonder if you're really being unreasonable or if you're simply standing up for what you feel is right.
Ida, for not including my friends that didn't pitch in for a B-Day gift. A couple of months back, I found the perfect birthday gift for one of my closest friends, a luxury item they'd been eyeing for years. It was pricey, around $700. So I thought it'd make sense to pool together with a few other friends to make it happen. I reached out to 5 friends about pitching in, and they all agreed to contribute $100 each. I'd covered the extra $200 myself, just to make sure we had enough. We agreed on this arrangement before I even bought the gift, and I made it clear that everyone's portion would be due 30 days from that day, giving them plenty of time to plan for it. 2 weeks before the birthday, 2 friends reached out to say they couldn't pay their share on time, but both promised to pay before the actual birthday. I told them that was fine, but made it clear that if they didn't pitch in, I'd have to cover the rest, and the gift would be labeled as being from just me and the other friends who paid on time. They reassured me that they'd have it ready by then, so I trusted they'd come through. Fast forward to the day of the party. I still hadn't received anything from those 2 friends, so I decided to ask them again, hoping they'd at least have a portion of their share. But instead, both admitted they didn't have the money to pay me and couldn't even give a partial amount. It was frustrating because they both agreed to this, and I'd gone out on a limb assuming they'd follow through. Now, I was left covering $400 out of the $700 on my own. Since they hadn't contributed anything, I wrote on the gift that it was from me and the 3 friends who'd paid on time. The 2 who hadn't paid noticed their names missing and weren't too happy about it. They pulled me aside and argued that I should have included them anyway, since they would have paid me back after the birthday. But here's the thing: throughout the entire month, they'd been spending money on what I'd call non-essentials: drinks, Pokemon cards, and a few other things. So clearly, paying me back just wasn't a priority. I tried to explain my side, but they still seemed hurt that I left their names off the gift. To me, it just didn't feel fair to include them when they didn't contribute, especially when I was covering such a big portion myself. So, Reddit family, Ida for leaving their names off the gift, even though they were part of the initial plan?
My fiancé, male 27, gave me female 32, a breakup reason, and I really need your brutally honest opinion on this. What intention do you suspect? My fiancé, male 27, and I, female 32, have been together for 5 years, and we share a 2-year-old son. We've been living together, building our life as a little family. He's younger than me, and I'm fully aware that, at his age, going out with friends is important, so I try to be relaxed about it. About once every month or so, he and his buddies hang out at this little cabin they have, drink beer, and stay out until the early morning hours. He's a responsible guy otherwise, so I haven't ever made a fuss about him staying out late. But this time, it felt different. He came back really late, crawled into bed, and fell asleep next to me. I don't know why, but I had a gut feeling something was off. So, out of curiosity, I checked his phone. I don't usually do this, but I felt compelled, and that's when I saw it a chat with someone named Haley Justin. It was weird because the entire conversation was deleted, which instantly raised red flags for me. The name Haley Justin threw me off, so I asked him about it, and he explained that Haley was just a friend of his friend Justin. That didn't make much sense to me, but I tried to push the thought away, telling myself maybe I was just overreacting. But something about it didn't sit right. I asked him a few more questions, and his answers were confusing and inconsistent. So I decided to reach out directly to his friend Justin to get some clarity. When I called Justin, he was at home, which was my first shock. My fiance had told me that he and Justin were together, just messing around with friends. But that clearly wasn't the case. Justin confirmed he was nowhere near the cabin that night, which meant my fiance was hanging out alone or with someone else. After a bit of back and forth, Justin admitted that my fiance had actually met Haley at a birthday party a month ago and asked him for her number. So now I knew the truth. He had lied about how he got Haley's number and lied about who he was with. Then I saw the messages from Haley the next morning, which Justin ended up sending me, and it confirmed what I suspected. He had texted her saying things like, "Hey Haley, it's me. We met last month at XYZ's birthday. And hey, answer your phone." Justin said we should talk, lol. And he had called her multiple times, 4 or 5, to be exact. When I confronted him with this, he tried to brush it off, saying he was really drunk and just motivating people to join the cabin hangout. He even said he had called a bunch of other people that night, but I knew he hadn't called Justin. I feel torn apart by this. I told him that his behavior felt like a deal breaker for me, and his response was to insist that nothing happened, that he was just drunk and being silly. He said he couldn't explain why he reached out to her, but swears it was just in fun. But here's the thing. He went through the effort to delete those conversations, which tells me he knew he was doing something he shouldn't have been doing. I can't shake this feeling of betrayal. I'm at a loss. I genuinely love him, and we have a family together, and if we didn't, I'd already be out the door. It feels like a huge red flag, and I don't know if this is something I can move past. I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering if I'm overreacting or if my gut is right. I need some brutal honesty. Am I overthinking this? What intentions do you all suspect behind his actions? I need perspective because this is breaking my heart. Since I confronted him, things at home have been tense. He keeps apologizing and insists he doesn't remember much about that night because he was too drunk. He's been saying all the right things, but I feel like he's sidestepping the actual problem. To me, it's not just about him reaching out to this random girl, it's the sneaking around, the lies, and the deleted messages that keep eating at me. Every time I think I'm starting to move past it, my mind goes back to the details. Why did he ask Justin for her number if he supposedly wasn't interested? Why delete the messages if it was all just harmless fun? And if I hadn't seen her name pop up on his phone, would he have ever told me about her? Part of me wants to believe him, that he was just being dumb and drunk, but the other part of me can't let go of the fact that he went behind my back and lied about it. I feel stuck in a cycle of doubt and mistrust, and it's affecting everything. I've started questioning myself and my own instincts. Is this really something I want to bring up and fight over? Should I just let it go? But then I wonder if letting it slide will set a precedent, making him think it's okay to be secretive about other mistakes he might make in the future. What makes it harder is the fact that we have a child together. I want to make sure we're in a healthy relationship, not just for us, but for our son. He deserves parents who respect and trust each other. And right now, I don't know if that's where we are. The other night, I tried to talk to him again, telling him how much this hurt and how I felt betrayed. He seemed frustrated, maybe because he thought this conversation was over, but he stayed patient. He even offered to let me go through his phone anytime I wanted. But at this point, it's not just about the texts, it's the breach of trust. I don't want to have to check his phone. I want to trust that he'll be honest with me on his own. A part of me wonders if this incident was his way of testing the waters. Maybe he's having doubts or wondering what else is out there, which is honestly terrifying to think about. But why would he risk everything for some random girl he met at a party? I just can't wrap my head around it. I'm torn between trusting his words and trusting my gut, and the weight of it all is exhausting. I've been considering counseling, both for myself and maybe for us as a couple, but I'm scared he'll think I'm overreacting. I feel like if I don't do something, though, this will keep haunting me, and I'll never be able to fully move forward. So, I'm here now, hoping for some outside perspectives. Am I blowing this out of proportion? Is this behavior a warning sign? Or am I overanalyzing a stupid mistake? What intentions do you all think he had? It's hard to see things clearly when you're in the middle of it. And right now, I just need some brutal honesty. The locker room puzzle. So, picture this. I, 31 female, recently inherited my grandmother's old Victorian house. It's one of those beautiful, creaky places with big windows, intricate woodwork, and just a slight air of mystery about it. I've been staying here for a few months, slowly settling in, learning the odd quirks of the place, like how the second floor radiator always clanks around midnight, or how the front door seems to close on its own when a storm's rolling in. But here's where things start getting weird. There's a small room on the third floor, a room that I never really gave much thought to. The door was always locked, and when I first moved in, I didn't bother with it, thinking it was probably just storage or maybe a forgotten attic space. The house came with a whole bunch of old, rusty keys, and I assumed one of them would fit if I ever felt like poking around up there. Then, one morning, I noticed something unusual. I was dusting the hallway when I glanced at the door of that little room and saw faint scratches around the keyhole, fresh scratches. It looked like someone had tried and failed to open the door recently. The odd part, I live alone. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed the ring of keys and went through every single one until, finally, I found the one that clicked. The door swung open with a low creak, revealing not the dusty storage I was expecting, but a small, dimly lit room. It was eerily well kept, with a single armchair facing the window and an old radio on a table beside it, still plugged in as if waiting for someone to come back. Sitting on the armchair was a photo album, open to a picture of my grandmother. She was young in the photo, maybe in her 20s, smiling and standing next to a man I didn't recognize. Then, the strangest part. The radio suddenly flickered to life with static. I jumped about a mile, my heart pounding, as I watched the dial turn ever so slightly on its own, landing on an old jazz station that crackled out a tune that sounded hauntingly familiar. In a daze, I turned the pages of the album and found dozens more photos of my grandmother and this man, laughing, holding hands, standing in front of this very house. Yet, no one in my family ever mentioned him. And why would she keep this room locked away, almost like a shrine? Over the next few nights, I began hearing footsteps above me, always leading to the small room. And every morning, the door would be locked again, as if I had never opened it. I've tried asking my family, but they all insist my grandmother lived alone her entire life. No long-lost lovers, no mysterious strangers, just her and this house. Now I'm left wondering if this man was more than just a memory. And why does he keep returning to that room? Part of me wants to lock it up again and forget it ever happened. But another part wonders if, just maybe, there's something he wants me to find. So, naturally, I couldn't just leave it at that. The next day, I returned to the room, only to find it exactly as I'd left it, album open, chair facing the window, and the radio still tuned to that same haunting jazz station. There was a chill in the air, like a draft coming from nowhere, and the feeling that someone had just been there. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I sat in the armchair. As I settled in, I flipped further through the photo album, and that's when things took an even stranger turn. Tucked in between two of the pages was a small folded letter. The paper was worn, its edges fraying, as if it had been opened and closed countless times. My hand shook a little as I unfolded it, the ink slightly smudged but still legible. My dearest Eleanor, if you ever find this, I hope it means that fate has brought us together again, even if only in memory. I've left a piece of myself with you, and as long as this house stands, a part of me will always be here too. Yours, S. The letter was unsigned beyond that single initial. S could have been someone from my grandmother's past that she'd kept a secret her entire life. But why would she keep it hidden? And why was this room kept untouched, as if preserved for him? Or maybe for me to discover all these years later? As I sat there, puzzling over this mystery, I felt a cold breeze on the back of my neck. I turned around, and I swear I saw a faint shadow near the door. It was like the outline of a man, tall and still, as if waiting. I blinked, and he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing faint whispers, almost like someone murmuring in the next room, too soft to make out but persistent. Around 3 a.m., the radio on the third floor switched on by itself again, playing that same tune. It was becoming more than just a coincidence, and I knew I had to dig deeper. I started to go through family records, anything that might tell me who this mysterious S could have been. After hours of searching through old boxes in the attic, I found a dusty journal belonging to my grandmother. Most of the entries were from her early 20s, detailing mundane things, her work, her friends, until a certain entry caught my eye. Today, I met a man, a stranger in town, with eyes that seemed to see right through me. We talked for hours, like we'd known each other for a lifetime. His name is Samuel. He has secrets, I can tell, but then, so do I. There were more entries about Samuel, each one more intense than the last, her words painting a picture of someone deeply important to her. But then, abruptly, they stopped. There was no explanation, no goodbye, just a page of her handwriting growing shaky, like she was struggling to finish. I couldn't shake the feeling that Samuel had never truly left, that somehow he was still tied to this house, to that locked room. Maybe they had parted ways for reasons she couldn't bear to write down, or maybe it had been something darker. And as I lay awake that night, the room silent, I began to understand that I was being drawn into their unfinished story, as if it was waiting for me to uncover what had been left behind. The next night, I went back to the room, armed with a flashlight and a determination to understand. As I stepped inside, I whispered into the dark, "Samuel, if you're still here, I want to know your story. Tell me." The radio crackled to life one last time, the music fading in and out. But this time, a voice echoed softly through the static, barely audible but clear enough to send chills down my spine. "Thank you for remembering." The room went silent, and a sudden warmth filled the air, like a presence passing through. The next morning, the door was unlocked and the radio was off, as if Samuel had finally moved on, leaving behind only a memory. And now, every time I walk by that little room, I can't help but feel a quiet peace, knowing that some stories, no matter how hidden, will always find a way to be told. As days turned into weeks, the lingering presence of Samuel felt more like a comforting shadow than a haunting. I found myself drawn to that room more often, almost like it had become my sanctuary. The walls, once closed off and filled with silence, now hummed with a vibrant energy, as if every forgotten moment and unspoken word had finally been acknowledged. Curious about my grandmother's connection to Samuel, I decided to explore her old belongings in the attic further. One rainy afternoon, I stumbled upon a small wooden box tucked away in a corner. It was intricately carved, its surface adorned with swirling patterns that seemed to tell stories of their own. As I opened it, I discovered a collection of letters, all tied with a faded ribbon. Each envelope bore the same name, Samuel. With trembling hands, I carefully unwrapped the ribbon and began to read. The letters were filled with the raw emotions of young love, joy, longing, and the kind of passion that made my heart ache. Each letter chronicled their relationship, detailing secret meetings at the park, stolen glances across crowded rooms, and whispered promises made under the stars. One letter stood out to me, dated a week before my grandmother's final entry in her journal. In it, Samuel wrote about a decision he had to make, a choice that would change everything. His words were frantic, revealing a depth of vulnerability I hadn't expected. He was torn between his responsibilities and his love for her, but he believed in the power of their connection. "I can't bear the thought of leaving you, but my family is pulling me back. I must choose between duty and love. If I leave, know that I will carry you with me, always." As I read, I could almost feel the weight of their unfulfilled dreams pressing down on me. The love they shared had been interrupted, and it was as if I had stumbled into the middle of a story that was never meant to end. The tears streamed down my face as I realized the impact of this lost love, not just on my grandmother, but on me as well. It felt like a part of my own heart was resonating with their longing. Determined to honor their love, I began a mission to uncover more about Samuel. My grandmother had never spoken of him after those early years, and I needed to know what had happened. I began reaching out to distant relatives, piecing together fragments of family history. Many were vague, but one distant cousin mentioned a small town where Samuel had lived before he seemingly disappeared. With my heart racing, I packed my bags for a weekend trip. I drove to the small town, its quaint streets lined with aged oak trees and the aroma of fresh baked goods wafting through the air. I felt an undeniable pull towards the local library, where I hoped to find more records or perhaps even someone who remembered Samuel. The librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes, welcomed me warmly. When I mentioned Samuel's name, her expression changed. She led me to a dusty section filled with local history. As we sifted through newspaper clippings, my heart raced when I found an article dated over 40 years ago. Local young man, Samuel, goes missing during military deployment. The article detailed how Samuel had enlisted during a time of conflict, leaving his life and my grandmother behind. There were no updates, no follow-up articles, just a somber note about a community mourning a promising young man. The weight of their love story hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. Returning home that evening, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Samuel had been loved deeply, and while his physical presence was gone, his spirit remained woven into the fabric of our family. I realized that my grandmother's secret was not just about heartbreak, but about the resilience of love itself. In the weeks that followed, I often found myself speaking to Samuel, feeling his presence as I made small changes in the room he had once occupied. I added a few personal touches, an old photograph of my grandmother, a small plant, and even a simple candle that I lit each night. It became a place of remembrance, not only for my grandmother and Samuel, but for the love stories that connect us all through time. One night, as I sat in that room, I noticed something glowing softly in the corner. I approached and found a small pendant lying on the floor, its silver chain tangled in a way that suggested it had just fallen from somewhere. It was a delicate locket, slightly tarnished but beautiful. I opened it, revealing two tiny photographs, one of my grandmother and another of a man who could only be Samuel. In that moment, I understood. Their love was a thread that had woven through generations, a reminder that while time moves on, the essence of love never truly fades. I decided to wear the locket, a tangible piece of their story resting close to my heart. As the seasons changed, so did my perspective on life and love. I began to share my grandmother's story with friends and family, encouraging them to honor their connections and cherish their relationships. Samuel and my grandmother had left behind a legacy of love that I felt compelled to carry forward. Years later, as I sat with my own son on that same armchair, I recounted the tale of his great-grandmother and her lost love. With wide eyes, he listened intently, the locket glinting softly against my chest. I hoped to instill in him a sense of appreciation for the stories that shape us, reminding him that love is a powerful force that transcends time and space. And in that room filled with memories, I felt Samuel's spirit watching over us, a quiet guardian of love stories that refuse to be forgotten. I've always been a bit of a loner, someone who prefers the company of books over people. My idea of a perfect day involved curling up in my favorite chair with a steaming cup of tea and getting lost in the pages of a fantasy novel. But that all changed the day I decided to take a different route home from work. It was an unseasonably warm day in early spring, and the sun was just starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. As I walked, I passed by a quaint little bookstore I had never noticed before, nestled between a bakery and a coffee shop. The faded sign above the door read, "The Enchanted Nook." I was immediately intrigued. I stepped inside, and the smell of old paper and leather filled my senses, wrapping around me like a warm hug. The shelves were stacked high with books of all genres, and fairy lights twinkled overhead, casting a magical glow over the room. An older gentleman sat behind the counter, his spectacles perched on the edge of his nose as he thumbed through a thick book. "Welcome," he said, his voice rich and warm. "Feel free to explore. Every book has a story to tell, and I have a feeling you might just find your next adventure." As I wandered through the aisles, I felt a strange pull towards the back of the store. There, nestled between two shelves, was a small, dusty book with a weathered cover. The title, "The Keeper of Dreams," was embossed in faded gold letters. I picked it up and felt a shiver run down my spine, as if the book were alive with untold stories. I flipped it open and was immediately captivated by the beautifully illustrated pages. The first few chapters described a young girl named Alara, who had the unique ability to enter the dreams of others and guide them through their deepest fears. Each dream she visited was more fantastical than the last, filled with whimsical creatures and enchanting landscapes. Before I knew it, an hour had passed, and I had lost myself in the world of Alara. The old man had quietly moved to a corner, reading his own book, allowing me the time to explore this new realm. When I finally looked up, I was surprised to find the shop nearly empty, the light outside dimming as the sun set. Feeling an unexpected attachment to the book, I decided to purchase it. The old man smiled knowingly as he rang me up, saying, "Ah, you've chosen wisely. That book has a way of finding its reader." I chuckled, thinking he was just being whimsical, but there was something in his eyes that made me pause. I hurried home, eager to dive back into Alara's world. That night, I read until my eyelids grew heavy. As I drifted off to sleep, I clutched the book to my chest, its pages whispering promises of adventure in my dreams. What happened next was something I could never have anticipated. I found myself standing in a vibrant meadow, the sun shining down on me, the smell of wildflowers in the air. Confused but intrigued, I looked around and gasped. There, sitting on a large rock, was Alara herself, looking just as she did in the illustrations, long, flowing hair and a crown of flowers adorning her head. "Welcome, dreamer," she said, her voice melodic. "You have entered the realm of dreams. I sensed your longing for adventure, and I'm here to guide you." I blinked in disbelief. Was this real? Was I dreaming? Alara smiled, sensing my confusion. "This is as real as it gets. Every time you open the book, you can visit me here, but only if you truly believe in the magic of dreams." From that night on, my life changed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Each time I read The Keeper of Dreams, I would find myself back in the meadow, exploring fantastical landscapes with Alara. We battled shadowy creatures that represented fears and insecurities, soared over majestic mountains, and even swam through oceans filled with sparkling mermaids. Alara taught me that dreams were not just a place for fantasy, but also a reflection of our inner selves. She encouraged me to face my anxieties, my fear of loneliness, my hesitation to reach out to others, and my apprehension about pursuing my passions. As weeks turned into months, I began to feel more confident and adventurous in my waking life. I started to talk to strangers, joined a local book club, and even signed up for a painting class, something I had always wanted to do, but had been too afraid to try. One evening, after an exhilarating dream adventure with Alara, I returned to the bookstore to find a gift for her, a small charm necklace with a tiny dream catcher. I wanted to show my appreciation for the courage she had instilled in me. As I entered the enchanted nook, the old man was waiting, a knowing smile on his face. You've grown, haven't you? He remarked. I nodded, feeling a sense of warmth and gratitude. I want to give this to Alara, I said, holding up the necklace. He chuckled softly, taking the charm in his hand. You're free to leave it here. She'll find it when she needs it most. I felt a sense of closure as I left the bookstore that day, knowing I had found not just a friend in Alara, but also a deeper understanding of myself. From then on, the dreams continued, but they took on a new tone. They became less about escaping reality and more about embracing it. I had learned to live in the moment, to cherish friendships, and to be fearless in pursuing my dreams. As I shared my journey with the book club, I discovered that others were experiencing similar transformations. They too had found magic in their own stories and were ready to face their fears together. We began to bond over our shared experiences, and I realized that I had created a community, a family of dreamers and adventurers. Years later, I still cherish that little book and the adventures I shared with Alara. It taught me that the stories we tell, whether in dreams or in reality, can shape who we are. The power of friendship and the courage to embrace our fears can turn even the loneliest of souls into a tapestry of vibrant connections. And every so often, when I feel the world pressing down on me, I return to that quaint bookstore, hoping to find the old man waiting with another story, ready to take me on another adventure into the realm of dreams. As the years passed, the enchanted nook became a sanctuary for me. I would often find myself slipping away from the stresses of daily life, where the hustle and bustle of adulthood could feel suffocating. The old man, whose name I learned was Mr. Hawthorne, had a way of knowing just what to recommend. Whenever I stepped through the door, he seemed to read my mood like an open book. One chilly autumn afternoon, I entered the store with a heavy heart. Life had thrown a few curveballs my way, work was overwhelming, and I had lost touch with a few friends from the book club. I felt isolated, and the familiar warmth of the store was a welcome comfort. "Ah, my dear dreamer," Mr. Hawthorne said, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. "You carry a storm within you today. Let's see if we can calm it." He gestured toward a new shelf he had recently set up, filled with books that seemed to shimmer under the soft lights. "What's this?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Books of healing and self-discovery," he replied. "Sometimes we need guidance from those who've walked the path before us. Perhaps one of these will speak to you." I browsed the titles, each one inviting me to explore the depths of my emotions. One book, Whispers of the Heart, caught my eye. The cover was adorned with a beautiful, ethereal illustration of a woman surrounded by a kaleidoscope of colors. I felt an urge to take it home, hoping it might offer insights into the turmoil I was feeling. That night, I curled up in my chair, a cozy blanket draped over me, and opened the book. The pages were filled with poignant stories of resilience, love, and the power of self-acceptance. Each chapter resonated deeply within me, mirroring the struggles I had faced over the past few months. I read late into the night, losing track of time as the words washed over me like a gentle tide. As I finished the last chapter, I felt a sense of renewal. The stories encouraged me to reach out and reconnect with my friends, to be vulnerable and share my feelings rather than retreat into my shell. Inspired, I grabbed my phone and sent a message to the book club group chat, suggesting we meet for coffee to catch up. The next day, I nervously arrived at our usual cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As I walked in, I was greeted with warm smiles and cheerful chatter. My friends were already seated, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. We spent hours laughing, sharing updates about our lives, and discussing our latest reads. When it was my turn to share, I opened up about my feelings of loneliness and the struggles I had faced. To my surprise, my friends echoed similar sentiments. It turned out that many of us had been feeling the weight of adulthood and the pressure to succeed, leading to a sense of isolation. We promised to be more intentional about staying connected, and by the end of our meeting, I felt lighter. The power of vulnerability had forged a deeper bond among us, and I realized that I was not alone in my journey. Over the next few months, our book club transformed into a close-knit community. We started hosting themed nights where we would read poetry aloud, share our favorite quotes, and even try our hand at writing our own stories. I found myself inspired to write again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. The words flowed like a river, and I began crafting short stories filled with magic and hope. One evening, during a particularly lively meeting, I noticed a newcomer at the back of the room, a shy woman named Lily. She had bright blue hair and an infectious smile, but seemed hesitant to engage. After the meeting, I approached her, curious about her story. "Hey, I'm glad you could join us. How did you hear about the book club?" I asked. Lily looked relieved to have someone to talk to. "I found the group online. I love reading, but I've been feeling pretty lonely since I moved to the city. I figured this would be a good way to meet people." Her honesty resonated with me, and I invited her to join our writing sessions. As the weeks went by, she became an integral part of our group, bringing her unique perspective and creativity. Inspired by Lily's enthusiasm, I suggested we organize a community writing event. We could invite others to share their stories, offer encouragement, and celebrate the power of words. The idea quickly gained traction, and we set a date for a Saturday afternoon in the park. The day of the event arrived, and the sun was shining brightly. A small crowd gathered, and we set up a cozy area with blankets and cushions. As people arrived, I felt a surge of excitement. The energy was electric as each person shared their stories, some poignant, others humorous, but all resonating deeply with the audience. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, I looked around at the faces illuminated by the warm glow of string lights. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the connections we had forged through our shared love of storytelling. In that moment, I realized that dreams could manifest not only in the pages of a book, but also in the bonds we create with others. The Enchanted Nook had not only introduced me to a world of magic, but had also led me to a community that felt like family. As the event drew to a close, I caught sight of Mr. Hawthorne standing at the edge of the gathering, a proud smile on his face. He approached me, his eyes twinkling. "You've done well, my dear. You've created a space where dreams and stories can flourish." I beamed back at him, knowing that my journey was just beginning. The adventure of life, filled with ups and downs, had become a tapestry of stories woven together with friendship, resilience, and the magic of dreams. And as I returned to the Enchanted Nook, time and again, I understood that the true enchantment lay not just in the books, but in the stories we share and the connections we nurture. Life, like a good book, is filled with unexpected plot twists, and I was ready to embrace each one with an open heart. In the following months, the Enchanted Nook became more than just a sanctuary, it transformed into a hub of creativity and connection. As word spread about our community writing events, more people began to join us, each bringing their unique voice and stories to share. The events were filled with laughter, occasional tears, and an unspoken understanding that we were all navigating life's complexities together. One particular evening, as I was arranging chairs for our next meeting, I overheard a conversation between Lily and Mr. Hawthorne. Lily was expressing her anxiety about an upcoming writing competition that she had entered. "What if they don't like my story?" she fretted, her fingers nervously twisting a strand of her blue hair. Mr. Hawthorne, ever the wise mentor, replied, "My dear, it is not the approval of others that defines your worth as a writer. It is the act of writing itself that holds power. Share your truth, and the right audience will find you." His words resonated with me, and I thought about my own hesitations. I had been writing short stories in secret, but I had never shared them beyond our group. Perhaps it was time for me to step out of my comfort zone as well. Inspired by Lily's bravery, I decided to submit one of my stories to a local literary magazine. The piece was a whimsical tale about a girl who discovers a magical library hidden in her town, where books could come to life. It felt like an extension of my own experiences with the Enchanted Nook and the way stories had changed my life. Weeks passed as we continued our meetings and built stronger bonds within our community. The friendships blossomed, and soon we were planning a weekend retreat at the cabin where many of us had gathered previously. It would be a chance to escape the chaos of our daily lives, share more stories, and strengthen our creative spirits. As we drove to the cabin that Friday, I couldn't shake off the mix of excitement and anxiety churning in my stomach. I hoped this retreat would solidify the connections we had formed, but I also felt a lingering fear of vulnerability. What if they didn't enjoy my writing? When we arrived, the cabin welcomed us with its rustic charm. The wooden beams, large windows, and crackling fireplace created a cozy atmosphere perfect for creativity. We spent the evening sharing ghost stories and laughter, our voices echoing against the cabin walls. The next morning, we gathered around a long table for breakfast, a feast of pancakes, fruit, and coffee. As we ate, I looked around at my friends, each one unique, yet all tied together by a shared passion for storytelling. Mr. Hawthorne had joined us, his presence providing a comforting anchor amidst the excitement. After breakfast, we settled in the living room, eager to delve into a workshop led by Mr. Hawthorne. Today, he said, we will explore the theme of vulnerability in storytelling. It's a powerful tool that can connect us deeply with our audience. We spent hours writing and sharing our work. As we took turns reading aloud, I was amazed at the diversity of experiences captured in each story. From tales of heartbreak to moments of joy and triumph, we all opened up, shedding the layers of self-doubt that often clouded our creativity. When it was my turn, I felt the familiar flutter of nerves in my stomach. But as I began to read my story about the magical library, I focused on the faces of my friends' encouragement shining in their eyes. The words flowed, and I poured my heart into every sentence. When I finished, the room erupted into applause. That was beautiful, Lily exclaimed, her eyes glistening with admiration. You have to submit that story everywhere. Mr. Hawthorne nodded in agreement. You've captured a sense of wonder that resonates deeply. Don't shy away from sharing your gift. Encouraged by their reactions, I decided then and there that I would submit my story to multiple publications. We continued sharing our writing late into the night, the warmth of the fireplace wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. As the retreat came to an end, I felt a sense of belonging that I had longed for. Our group had become a safe space where we could explore our fears and celebrate our triumphs. On the drive back home, I reflected on the journey I had taken from feeling isolated and overwhelmed to being part of a vibrant community that uplifted and inspired me. In the weeks that followed, I submitted my story to various literary magazines and began to receive positive feedback. It was exhilarating to see my words resonating with others. One afternoon, I received an email from a magazine inviting me to be featured in their upcoming issue. They wanted to publish my story. I could hardly believe it. As I shared the news with my friends at our next meeting, their cheers filled the room. You did it, Lily shouted, her blue hair bouncing with excitement. I knew you could. Amidst the celebrations, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. The enchanted nook, Mr. Hawthorne, and my newfound friends had transformed my life in ways I had never imagined. But amid the joy, I also realized that this was just the beginning of my journey as a writer. I was inspired to not only share my stories, but also help others find their voice. So, I proposed a new initiative to our group, writing workshops for aspiring writers in our community. Let's create a space where others can find their passion for storytelling, I suggested. We can guide them, just like Mr. Hawthorne did for us. My friends rallied behind the idea, and soon we were planning our first workshop. We reached out to local libraries and community centers, eager to share our love for writing and encourage others to embrace their creativity. As we launched our workshops, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each session was filled with laughter, creativity, and inspiration as we guided others in exploring their narratives. Watching others find their voices was incredibly fulfilling. Throughout this journey, the enchanted nook remained a constant source of magic in my life. Mr. Hawthorne, with his twinkling eyes and wisdom, continued to inspire us all. I cherished the friendships I had cultivated, knowing that together we were creating a community of storytellers, one that would keep growing and flourishing. As I stood in the store one evening, surrounded by the comforting scent of old books and the soft glow of the lights, I realized that my life had become an enchanting story of its own, a tale of resilience, connection, and the transformative power of words. And I couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring. As the months went by, the Enchanted Nook evolved into more than just a community hub. It became a beacon of hope for aspiring writers from all walks of life. Each workshop attracted a diverse group of participants, and we welcomed everyone with open arms. Some were seasoned writers seeking inspiration, while others were complete novices, hesitant yet eager to share their stories. One evening, as I set up for a workshop, I noticed a woman sitting quietly in the corner. She looked to be in her late 50s, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a worn notebook. Her name was Eleanor, and she had come to us seeking solace after losing her husband just a few months prior. She explained that she had always dreamed of writing, but had never found the courage to do so until now. Her vulnerability struck a chord with me, and I was determined to help her find her voice. As Eleanor began sharing her writings, the room fell silent. Her stories, infused with both sorrow and hope, captivated everyone. She wrote about her late husband, the adventures they had shared, and the memories that brought her both joy and pain. It was raw and real, and as she read aloud, tears filled her eyes, and the rest of us felt a profound connection to her journey. After her reading, I approached her. Eleanor, your words are powerful. Have you considered publishing your stories? I asked gently. She shook her head, looking down at her notebook. I don't think anyone would want to read them. They're just my memories. Those memories are worth sharing, I insisted. You have a gift, and your experiences could inspire others going through similar struggles. Encouraged by my words and the supportive nods from the group, Eleanor began to feel a glimmer of hope. We spent extra time after the workshop discussing her writing, and I helped her craft a plan to submit her stories to various literary platforms. Slowly but surely, she began to believe in herself. As Eleanor's confidence grew, she became a regular at our workshops, often leading sessions focused on the theme of healing through storytelling. Her journey inspired many participants, and soon, a bond formed among us. We celebrated each other's milestones, big and small, reinforcing the notion that we were not just a group of writers, we were a family. Meanwhile, I continued my own writing endeavors, finding that my words flowed more freely as I drew inspiration from the stories shared in our meetings. My first publication arrived in the mail one crisp autumn morning, a beautiful magazine featuring my magical library story. I couldn't wait to share the moment with my friends. At our next meeting, I brought copies of the magazine to share with the group. As I held it up, my heart raced. I have something to show you all, I exclaimed, my voice trembling with excitement. The room erupted into cheers as I revealed the magazine cover, adorned with my name. Lily squealed, and Mr. Hawthorne beamed with pride. This is just the beginning, he said, his eyes twinkling. Your words have the power to reach far beyond these walls. The celebration continued as we toasted to our collective success. Everyone contributed to the festivities. Eleanor brought homemade cookies, while others brought sparkling cider. The atmosphere was electric with joy and camaraderie, and it was clear that the Enchanted Nook was thriving. Inspired by our achievements, we decided to host a community reading event to showcase not only our writings, but also the voices of those we had mentored. We set a date and began planning, excited about the opportunity to share our stories with the broader community. As the event approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I wanted it to be perfect, a reflection of the incredible journey we had all taken together. We decorated the store with fairy lights and arranged chairs for our audience, creating an inviting atmosphere. On the day of the reading, the store was buzzing with anticipation. Friends, family, and even curious strangers filled the room, eager to hear our stories. The evening began with an introduction from Mr. Hawthorne, who spoke eloquently about the power of storytelling and the importance of community. One by one, We took turns reading our pieces. I read an excerpt from my magical library story, while Eleanor shared a poignant reflection on love and loss. Each reading was met with heartfelt applause and encouragement, creating an atmosphere of support that lifted us all. As the night unfolded, I looked around the room, filled with faces of friends and new connections. It struck me how far we had all come, united by our passion for writing and the bonds we had forged. We laughed, cried, and celebrated together, creating a tapestry of stories that wove us closer. As the final reader concluded, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. This community, this enchanted space, had not only nurtured my writing, but had also given me a sense of belonging I had longed for. In the weeks that followed, our community reading became a regular event, drawing in more people and expanding our network of storytellers. The Enchanted Nook thrived, and I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose in my role as both a writer and a mentor. But with this success came new challenges. As we gained more visibility, I realized that not everyone in our community appreciated what we were doing. A few local writers, feeling threatened by our growing popularity, began to spread rumors and negativity about our group. They questioned the authenticity of our stories and dismissed our efforts as mere amateur pursuits. One afternoon, as I was tidying up the store, I overheard a conversation between two patrons. They were discussing our reading events, their words dripping with condescension. Who do they think they are? Just a bunch of hobbyists trying to play at being writers, one of them sneered. Hurt but determined, I approached them, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. We're not just playing at being writers, we're building a community that supports and uplifts each other. Everyone's voice matters, regardless of their experience. The two exchanged incredulous glances, clearly taken aback by my confrontation. It's just a bunch of amateurs, the other one scoffed. You really think you can make a career out of this? With my heart pounding, I replied, maybe not all of us are looking for a career, but we all deserve the chance to share our stories. Writing is about connection, and we've created something special here. That's what matters. As I walked away, I felt a mix of anger and determination. I refused to let negativity overshadow the progress we had made. That night, I shared my experience with the group during our meeting, and together we decided to rise above the criticism. We launched a campaign celebrating the uniqueness of each writer's journey, emphasizing that storytelling was about authenticity and expression, not validation from others. We created a social media hashtag, #WriteYourTruth, encouraging people to share their stories and connect with us. The response was overwhelming. Writers and creatives from all over the region began to share their experiences, embracing the message of authenticity and vulnerability. The movement grew, and we found ourselves inspiring others to pursue their passions without fear of judgment. In the face of adversity, the Enchanted Nook became a symbol of resilience and creativity. We learned to embrace our differences and celebrate our collective journey as storytellers. Together, we were proving that writing was not just about skill or talent, but about the courage to express oneself. As the seasons changed and the air grew crisp, I reflected on the incredible transformation I had experienced since joining the Enchanted Nook. The connections I had formed, the stories we had shared, and the sense of community we had built were gifts I would cherish forever. And so, I continued to write, mentor, and inspire others, knowing that our enchanted journey was far from over. With each new story we shared, we were creating a legacy of creativity, connection, and the magic that comes from embracing our true selves. Ida, for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she broke her last one. So, here's the deal. I, 30 fads, have a pretty reliable car that I've saved up for years to buy. It's not fancy, but it gets me where I need to go. My younger sister, Lily, 26 farads, has been through a series of bad luck with cars. The last one she totaled in an accident after driving recklessly. Luckily, she walked away without injury, but it's been a source of frustration for my parents and me. Lily's been borrowing my car for the last few months while she looks for a new one. And while I've been supportive, I've also expressed my concerns. She often forgets to fill the gas tank, and she leaves it a mess. Just last week, I found empty fast food bags and spilled coffee cups in the back seat. I had to spend my Saturday cleaning it out, which I wasn't happy about. The other day, she texted me asking if she could borrow my car again for a weekend trip with her friends. I hesitated, knowing she planned to drive to a nearby city about 2 hours away. I replied that I wasn't comfortable with her taking it since I had plans to use it that weekend. And honestly, I was worried about how she'd treat it again. She flipped out on me, calling me selfish and saying that I don't care about her happiness. She pointed out that I've always been protective of my car and suggested that I'm holding her back from enjoying life. This really upset me because I do care about her, but I also think she needs to learn responsibility when it comes to owning a vehicle. After our argument, my parents got involved, telling me that I should help Lily out since she's struggling. They even mentioned that it's just a car and that I should be more understanding. Now I'm feeling guilty and questioning whether I'm being unreasonable. So, Ida for refusing to lend my car to my sister after everything that's happened? As the days passed, my sister's anger didn't subside. She started posting passive aggressive stories on social media, making it clear she was upset with me. I could see my friends viewing them, and I felt humiliated. I wanted to defend myself, but didn't want to make things worse by airing our family drama publicly. One evening, I decided to talk to my parents about it again. I expressed how frustrated I was with their perspective. They seemed to think that my attachment to my car was unreasonable. But I explained that it wasn't just about the car, it was about responsibility. I shared how I've worked hard to maintain my vehicle and how I felt my sister wasn't respecting that. To my surprise, my mom started to see my side a bit more. She mentioned how she felt bad for me having to clean up after Lily's mess. Still, my dad insisted I should just let it go and help Lily, reminding me how difficult it was for her to be without a car. I felt torn. I wanted to support my sister, but also felt like I had valid reasons for my decision. The next weekend, Lily showed up unannounced at my apartment. She looked upset and immediately started crying. I let her in, and we sat on the couch, where she began to pour her heart out. She told me that without a car, she felt trapped and was having a hard time finding a job. She felt like I was the only one who could help her, and she really needed me. I'm just trying to figure my life out, and I thought you would be there for me, she said between sobs. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just don't know what else to do. I could see how much she was struggling, and my heart softened a little. We talked for hours, and I listened to her explain her plans to be more responsible and how she was looking at different jobs. Finally, after a long conversation, I offered her a compromise. I would let her borrow my car for just one day. I set clear boundaries. She had to fill the tank before returning it, and she needed to keep it clean. I also told her that if anything happened, she'd be responsible for any repairs. She agreed, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was a small step toward rebuilding trust, and I hoped it would encourage her to take responsibility. After that, things felt a little better between us. But then, a week later, she returned the car with an empty tank and a spilled drink in the cup holder. My heart sank again. I felt like I'd made a mistake by trusting her, and the cycle of frustration started anew. Now I'm back to questioning whether I should have just stuck to my guns about not lending my car in the first place. I love my sister, and I want her to succeed, but I also need to protect my space and my belongings. So, am I the asterisk hole for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she didn't respect my boundaries? After Lily returned my car in less than ideal condition, I felt a mix of frustration and disappointment. I was already wavering between guilt and resentment, and this just reignited all those feelings. I spent the next few days trying to process everything. Each time I stepped outside, I was reminded of the mess she left in my car, and it made me question if I'd ever get back to feeling comfortable lending it to her again. My boyfriend, Mark, 31M, noticed my distress and sat me down one evening. You need to stand firm on this, he said. It's not just about the car, it's about setting boundaries. If she can't respect them, it's going to keep happening. I appreciated his support, but I also felt like I was stuck between wanting to help my sister and needing to assert my boundaries. I took a couple of days to cool off before deciding to have another conversation with Lily. I wanted to approach it calmly, without anger or accusations, to let her know how I felt. When I invited her over, I made sure to create a safe space. We sat on the couch and I opened the discussion. Hey, I wanted to talk about what happened when you borrowed my car. I know we agreed on the conditions, and it hurt to see those boundaries crossed. I started. To my surprise, she seemed genuinely remorseful. I'm really sorry about that, she said, her voice soft. I thought I could manage, but I should have taken better care of it. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I could see her sincerity, and it helped to ease some of my frustration. I appreciate you saying that. I know you're going through a tough time, but I also need you to understand why this is so important to me. It's not just about the car, it's about trust. I need to know that I can rely on you to respect what I value. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I get it. I'm trying to figure everything out, and I guess I didn't realize how much my actions were affecting you. Can we try again? I promise to do better next time. I took a deep breath, contemplating whether to give her another chance. I'm willing to let you borrow it again, but we have to set stricter boundaries this time. If you can't keep your end of the deal, I can't lend it out again. After some back and forth, we agreed that she could borrow my car for a short trip this time to run some errands and get groceries. I laid out specific expectations. She had to return it with a full tank and ensure it was clean. She seemed genuinely committed to following through. A few days later, Lily returned the car in great shape. It was clean, the tank was full, and she even left a little thank you note on the dashboard. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It seemed like she had taken my words to heart. As we talked after she returned it, I realized our bond was strengthening again. We laughed, reminisced about our childhood adventures, and for the first time in a while, I felt like my sister was on the right path. She promised to keep working on her responsibilities, and I committed to being more open with her about my feelings. Things are better between us now, though I still feel a little hesitant about lending my car again. I know it will take time to rebuild that trust fully. Looking back, I'm glad I had that conversation with her instead of shutting her out completely. Setting boundaries is crucial, but so is understanding and supporting family. It's a delicate balance, but I think we're getting there. So, Ida for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she broke my trust, but also for eventually giving her a chance to prove herself again. After the successful return of my car, I felt a newfound sense of hope for my relationship with Lily. We began to spend more time together, gradually mending the rift that had formed between us. She started opening up about her struggles, her work issues, feelings of inadequacy, and the pressure she felt being the youngest sibling. I had always seen her as the carefree, fun-loving sister, but it was clear that there was a lot more beneath the surface. One weekend, we decided to have a movie night at my place. I cooked up some popcorn, and we settled into the couch with a couple of our favorite childhood films. As we laughed and reminisced about our younger days, I could see her genuinely enjoying herself. It was moments like these that reminded me of why I loved her so much and why I wanted to support her, even when things got complicated. During a break in the movie, Lily turned to me with a serious expression. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what happened with the car and how I treated you, she said. I'm really sorry for that. I've realized I need to take more responsibility, not just with your car, but in my life overall. Her honesty took me by surprise. I had been expecting her to brush it off or deflect the blame, but here she was, owning up to her mistakes. Thank you for saying that, I replied, my voice softening. It means a lot to me. I've been feeling the strain, and I want to be here for you, but I need to know that we can trust each other. She nodded, looking thoughtful. I want that too. I've been working on myself lately, trying to be better. I started a new routine for my mental health, and it's helping. I want you to know that I'm serious about improving our relationship. Feeling inspired by her determination, I shared my own struggles, explaining how the past few months had been challenging for me as well. I had been so focused on keeping my distance and protecting myself that I hadn't allowed myself to fully engage with her. It felt good to let her in, to share my vulnerabilities. As we continued talking, I began to see glimpses of the sister I once knew, the fun, supportive person who had always been there for me. We talked late into the night, swapping stories and sharing laughter, and by the time the credits rolled on our last movie, I felt a sense of warmth and connection that had been missing for so long. Over the following weeks, we maintained this renewed openness. Lily even took the initiative to plan a day out for us. She wanted to treat me to lunch and a trip to a local art gallery. It was her way of showing appreciation for my support and a chance for us to bond outside of our usual routine. On the day of our outing, as we walked through the gallery, I felt a surge of gratitude. Lily pointed out pieces that resonated with her and shared her thoughts on them. For the first time in ages, it felt like we were on the same wavelength again. She had taken the time to engage with something I loved, and I appreciated her effort. As we sat down for lunch afterward, she brought up her recent progress. "I've been saving money and focusing on my goals," she said, a proud smile on her face. "I even made a plan to move out on my own soon. I think it'll help me feel more independent." I couldn't help but smile back at her. "That's amazing, Lily. I'm so proud of you for taking those steps. It's not easy, but you're doing it." The conversation drifted to our future aspirations, dreams we had as kids that still lingered in the background of our adult lives. We reminisced about how we used to dream about traveling the world together and starting a business. It was refreshing to remember those carefree days, and I realized how important it was to have these discussions again. By the end of our lunch date, I felt a renewed sense of hope. I knew that trust takes time to rebuild, but we were on the right track. My heart was lighter, and I felt like I had my sister back in my life. As we left the restaurant, Lily turned to me and said, "Thanks for being patient with me. I know I messed up, but I'm ready to prove that I can be the sister you deserve." And in that moment, I realized that relationships are a two-way street. Yes, I had set boundaries, but I had also allowed space for her to grow and learn from her mistakes. In turn, I was reminded that family isn't just about blood, it's about the commitment to support and love each other, even when things get tough. So, Ida for initially refusing to lend my car to my sister, but ultimately deciding to give her a chance to prove herself again. As the weeks passed, Lily's commitment to change became more evident. She started keeping her room tidy, budgeting her expenses better, and even signed up for a cooking class, something we had always talked about doing together. Each time I saw her making an effort, it warmed my heart. I felt like I was witnessing her transformation firsthand, and it brought back fond memories of the bond we once shared. One evening, as I was working on a project for my job, I heard a knock on my door. It was Lily, holding a box of cookies she had baked in her cooking class. "Surprise! I wanted to share these with you," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Wow, you baked these?" I asked, genuinely impressed. "Yep, they're a little lopsided, but I think they taste good," she said, laughing as she handed me the box. I took a bite and was pleasantly surprised by how delicious they were. "These are amazing. You should definitely make these more often," I encouraged her, and she beamed with pride. That night, we sat on the couch, sharing stories about our childhood and reminiscing about our family gatherings. It felt so refreshing to be in each other's company again, the atmosphere light and filled with laughter. It was a stark contrast to the tension that had clouded our relationship just months earlier. Then, Lily broached a topic that had been on her mind for a while. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about the car situation and how it affected us. I don't want you to feel like you have to keep rescuing me," she said. "I want to learn how to take care of myself without relying on you or anyone else." Her vulnerability struck a chord. "I appreciate that, Lily. It means a lot to me that you're recognizing it. But just know that I'm here to support you, not to take care of you like a parent," I replied. "I get that now. I don't want to be a burden. I just want to be the sister you can count on too," she said earnestly. As we spoke, I realized that our relationship had shifted. No longer was I merely the older sister looking out for her younger sibling. We were becoming partners in this journey of life. It felt empowering to have those conversations where we could openly express our feelings, fears, and hopes. The next month brought even more positive changes. Lily asked me to help her with her resume as she started looking for jobs. Together, we worked on it over coffee, brainstorming ways to showcase her skills. I could see her confidence grow as we crafted a compelling narrative around her experiences. It was fulfilling to see her embrace the process of seeking independence, and I felt proud to be by her side. A few weeks later, she received an interview for a part-time job at a local cafe. I was excited for her and offered to help her prepare. "Let's do a mock interview," I suggested, and she agreed. As we practiced, I could see the determination in her eyes. The day of the interview arrived, and Lily was a bundle of nerves. "What if they don't like me?" she fretted. "Just be yourself. You've got this. Remember to smile and show them your enthusiasm," I reassured her. After the interview, she called me, practically vibrating with excitement. "I think it went really well. They seem to like me." A week later, she received a call offering her the jobs. The joy in her voice when she shared the news was contagious. "I can't believe it. I got the jobs," she squealed. I could hear the pride radiating through her words. As she started her new job, our relationship continued to flourish. We became more involved in each other's lives, supporting each other through both challenges and celebrations. We attended family gatherings together, where we made sure to introduce each other to new people and navigate conversations as a united front. One evening, while we were out for dinner, Lily suddenly turned serious. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. You really believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and it means the world to me," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "Of course, Lily. You've done all the hard work. I'm just proud to see you becoming the person you always wanted to be," I replied, feeling my heart swell with affection for her. Months later, we found ourselves in a much better place. We could now have lighthearted banter and discussions about our future dreams without the shadow of tension looming over us. One weekend, as we prepared to celebrate my birthday, Lily suggested we host a small gathering with friends. "Let's do something fun together. We can plan games and good food," she proposed excitedly. I smiled at her enthusiasm. "That sounds perfect. Let's make it a celebration of our sisterhood too." As we planned the party, I reflected on how far we had come. Our journey hadn't been easy, but the challenges had only strengthened our bond. I knew that as we continued to support each other, we could overcome anything life threw our way. In that moment, I felt grateful not just for my sister, but for the deepening of our relationship. Family isn't always perfect, but with love, understanding, and a little patience, it can thrive and flourish in unexpected ways. So, Ida for initially refusing to lend my car, but ultimately learning to trust my sister again and being there for her as she grows. Ida for confronting my sister about her secret and putting family first. So, here's the situation. I, 34 Farads, have a younger sister, Mia, 30 Farads, who has always been the more adventurous one. While I followed a more traditional path, settling down, getting married, and focusing on my career, Mia has traveled the world, trying out new jobs and meeting new people. I've always admired her spirit, but lately, things have taken a strange turn. A few months ago, Mia came back home to visit our parents. She seemed different, more withdrawn and secretive than usual. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the stress of her recent travels. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One evening, while we were sitting around the dinner table, I noticed she was constantly checking her phone and responding to messages in hushed tones. Our parents didn't seem to notice, but I felt compelled to dig a little deeper. After dinner, I followed her outside when she went for a breath of fresh air. "Mia, what's going on? You've been acting really strange," I said, trying to sound casual. She hesitated, looking torn between wanting to share and keeping things private. "It's nothing, really. Just work stuff," she replied, brushing it off. but I couldn't let it go. You know you can tell me anything, right? You don't have to hide things from your big sister. That seemed to open the floodgates. Mia sighed deeply and said, Fine, but you have to promise not to freak out. I nodded, my heart racing, curious about what she would reveal. I've been working on a documentary project with a friend I met in Thailand, she started. It's about the black market for exotic pets and how people exploit animals for profit. I was shocked. Mia, that sounds dangerous. Are you safe? She assured me that she was careful and that they were working with a reputable organization. But the more she talked, the more I realized she had gotten deeply involved in something I didn't agree with. But why are you doing this? You're risking your safety and well-being. I couldn't help but feel worried. Her expression hardened slightly. Because someone has to do it. I want to expose the truth, and if it means putting myself out there, then so be it. Not everyone gets to live a comfortable life, you know? I understood her passion, but I was terrified for her. Mia, you need to think about the consequences. This isn't just an adventure, it's serious. Over the next few days, I watched her as she continued to receive calls and text messages related to the project. One evening, I overheard her discussing meeting up with some shady contacts in a hotel. That was it for me. I couldn't stand by and let her put herself in danger without at least trying to intervene. The next morning, I confronted her directly. Mia, I know you're planning to meet some people who might not have your best interests at heart. I'm really worried about you. She glared at me, frustration bubbling over. You don't understand. This is important work. I'm trying to make a difference, and you're just trying to keep me locked up in a box. I took a deep breath. It's not about that. I just want you to be safe. Can't you find a way to help without putting yourself in harm's way? At that moment, she revealed something that shook me to my core. I've already committed to filming this. I can't just walk away. There are people counting on me. Plus, I'm not doing this alone. I have a team. That's when I decided to take action. I couldn't just sit back and watch my sister potentially walk into danger. I contacted the organization she claimed to be working with, posing as a concerned family member. I explained the situation and expressed my fears. They were surprisingly understanding and assured me they would keep an eye on her, but they also mentioned that they could not interfere with her choice to participate. The next day, Mia discovered that I had contacted the organization. She was furious. How could you do that? You've ruined everything, she shouted, tears in her eyes. I felt a pang of guilt, but stood my ground. I did it because I love you, Mia. I can't just let you put yourself at risk for something that could endanger your life. The argument escalated, and we both said things we didn't mean. Mia accused me of being controlling, while I expressed my deep concern for her safety. After what felt like hours of back and forth, we reached a stalemate. She stormed out, leaving me feeling heartbroken. Days passed without communication. I felt awful, questioning whether I overstepped my boundaries. But then, a week later, I received a text from Mia asking if we could meet. I was apprehensive but agreed, hoping we could reconcile. When we met, she looked different, more grounded. I've thought a lot about what you said. I was angry, but I understand your concerns, she began. I've decided to pull out of the documentary. I didn't realize how much it was affecting our relationship and my well-being. Relief washed over me. Really? I'm so glad to hear that, I said, giving her a hug. I just want you to be happy and safe. We spent hours talking about her experiences, and she opened up about the pressure she felt to prove herself through her adventures. It became clear that the situation had been a wake-up call for both of us. In the following weeks, our relationship improved significantly. Mia started focusing on her passion for wildlife photography instead, which allowed her to still engage with animals without putting herself in danger. I admired her resilience and newfound sense of purpose, and she appreciated that I had pushed her to reevaluate her choices. Now, we're closer than ever. We've even started planning a photography trip together, and I can't wait to explore the world with her by my side, this time with safety as our priority. As the weeks went by, Mia and I found a renewed sense of understanding and respect for each other. She began to take her wildlife photography seriously, investing in better equipment and honing her skills. We even enrolled in an online photography course together, and it was a joy to bond over our shared interest. One sunny Saturday, we decided to head out to a nearby nature reserve, armed with our cameras and a determination to capture the beauty of the wildlife. The reserve was alive with the sound of chirping birds and rustling leaves, and we spent hours exploring different trails, snapping photos of everything from vibrant flowers to elusive deer. It felt good to be doing something productive together, and the excitement of being out in nature brought back the laughter and fun that had been missing from our relationship for a while. While we were taking a break near a picturesque pond, I asked her, "How are you feeling about everything now? The documentary, your photography, all of it?" Mia smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "I feel free. It's like I've been holding my breath for so long, trying to prove something to myself, but this is my passion. I don't need to put myself in danger to feel alive anymore." Her words struck a chord with me. I had always admired her adventurous spirit, but hearing her express this newfound clarity made me realize how important it is to prioritize safety and well-being. "I'm proud of you, Mia. You've turned this situation into something beautiful," I said, squeezing her hand. As we continued our adventure, I noticed a shift in how we interacted. The playful banter and inside jokes returned, and we started to discuss future plans exhibiting her photos in local galleries, possibly even creating a joint project that combined my writing and her photography. Then one day, I received an unexpected message from Mia's former friend, Justin, the one who had been part of her documentary project. He reached out to apologize for any misunderstandings and shared that he had seen some of Mia's recent work on social media. "It's incredible. I'm glad to see her pursuing her passion," he wrote. This opened up an opportunity for Mia to reconnect with her old friends on her own terms, without the pressure of dangerous projects hanging over her head. Encouraged by this support, she decided to organize a small gathering at our family home, inviting her friends, including Justin. The night of the gathering was filled with laughter and memories. As Mia shared her journey, from her initial adventures to her decision to focus on photography, her friends were genuinely impressed. They all rallied around her, offering support and ideas for her future projects. It was heartwarming to see her embraced by the people she cared about. I felt a swell of pride as I watched Mia thrive. She had transformed a potentially harmful situation into an opportunity for growth, not just for herself, but for those around her. Then, one evening, as we were going through her photos from the reserve, she turned to me with a serious expression. "You know, I've been thinking about how I want to give back. Maybe I could do a charity project, using my photography to raise awareness about wildlife conservation. What do you think?" I was taken aback by her initiative, but excited about the idea. "That sounds amazing. We could partner with local organizations and even host a photo exhibit to raise funds." From that moment on, we poured our energy into planning this charity projects. We spent countless hours researching organizations, reaching out to potential sponsors, and brainstorming ideas for the exhibit. With each passing day, I could see Mia becoming more confident and passionate about her work, and it reminded me how important it is to support one another in our pursuits. Finally, the day of the exhibit arrived. The local community center was buzzing with excitement, and Mia's photos adorned the walls. Each piece told a story, and people were captivated by her ability to capture the beauty of nature while highlighting the need for conservation. As we welcomed guests and talked about the purpose of the event, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I was proud not only of Mia, but also of how far we had come together. By the end of the night, we had raised a significant amount of money for the wildlife organization, and Mia beamed with pride. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. "I'll always have your back," I replied, feeling a warmth in my heart. "We're a team." Reflecting on the journey we had taken, I realized that this experience had not only brought us closer together, but had also taught me the importance of open communication and understanding. It reminded me that sometimes confronting difficult situations can lead to incredible growth and transformation. Now, as we continue to explore the world through Mia's lens, I can't help but feel excited about the future. We've created a beautiful bond built on trust, respect, and a shared passion for making a difference. Mia and I settled into our new routine. Our lives began to reflect the harmony we had created through our joint efforts. The success of the charity exhibit opened doors for Mia, leading to opportunities she had only dreamed of before. Local magazines started featuring her work, and she received invitations to speak at events about wildlife photography and conservation. One afternoon, as we were working on her next photo project, this time focusing on endangered species, I noticed Mia was more energized than ever. "I've been thinking," she said, scrolling through her photos on her laptop. "I want to do a series on local wildlife and their habitats. I'd love to partner with schools to educate kids about conservation. What do you think?" "That's a fantastic idea. You could inspire a whole new generation to care about the environment," I replied, feeling the excitement build. "We could even organize workshops where kids can come out with us and learn photography. It'll be a hands-on way to teach them about the importance of preserving nature." With that, we began planning a community outreach program. We reached out to schools, pitched our idea, and soon we were setting up dates for workshops at various elementary schools in the area. The response was overwhelming. Teachers loved the idea of incorporating photography with environmental education. On the day of our first workshop, we arrived at Oakwood Elementary, armed with cameras, enthusiasm, and a clear vision. The students were buzzing with energy as they gathered around us, eager to learn. "Today, we're going to explore the beautiful nature around your school and learn how to capture it through photography," Mia explained, her voice filled with passion. "We'll talk about why these animals and plants are important to our ecosystem and how we can help protect them." As we walked through the schoolyard, I watched Mia in action. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and the kids were completely engaged. She guided them on how to compose their shots, explaining the different aspects of photography while sharing fascinating facts about the local wildlife. During a break, a little girl named Emily approached me with wide eyes. "Mr. Joe, I want to be just like Mia when I grow up. She's so cool." I chuckled. "You know, you can be whatever you want. And if you work hard like Mia, you can achieve amazing things." I gestured toward Mia, who was laughing and demonstrating how to take a picture of a butterfly. By the end of the day, the kids had taken some incredible photos, and we had instilled a sense of wonder about the natural world in their young hearts. Mia beamed with pride as we wrapped up, and I felt a swell of admiration for her dedication. As the workshops continued, we saw a tangible impact in the community. Students began to develop a keen interest in photography, and many of them started projects focusing on conservation efforts in their own neighborhoods. It was heartwarming to witness the ripple effect of Mia's passion. One day, after a particularly successful workshop, Mia and I sat on our porch, enjoying the cool evening breeze. "I never imagined I could make this much of a difference," she said, a mix of disbelief and joy in her voice. "It feels amazing." "You've always had it in you, Mia. You just needed the right path to follow," I replied, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. "I'm proud of everything you've accomplished." Then she turned serious. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about how much we've grown together. I feel like we're a stronger team than ever, and I want to make sure we keep building on that." "Absolutely. I think we've learned how important it is to communicate and support each other," I said, nodding. "Whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them together." Inspired by our journey, Mia and I began brainstorming new ways to expand her outreach. We decided to launch a community photo contest centered on wildlife, inviting everyone to submit their best shots. The winners would receive prizes and have their work displayed at a local gallery. The contest not only celebrated the beauty of nature, but also encouraged people to explore their surroundings and appreciate the world around them. The response was incredible. Families came together, exploring parks and nature trails, all while capturing the splendor of their environment. As the contest culminated in an exhibition, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. The event was a celebration of community, creativity, and the environment, and I felt proud to stand by Mia's side as she continued to inspire others. During the opening night of the exhibition, I watched Mia as she mingled with guests, her passion infectious. She had found her voice and was using it to empower others. When it was time for her to speak, she stepped onto the stage, the audience's attention focused on her. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady. "This project isn't just about photography, it's about connection between us and the natural world. We all have a role to play in protecting our environment, and I hope this inspires you to get involved." The applause was thunderous, and I felt my heart swell with pride for her. After the event, people approached us, eager to collaborate on future projects. Mia had created a movement, one that encouraged people to engage with nature and advocate for conservation. As we cleaned up after the event, I looked at Mia and said, "You've created something truly special here. I can't wait to see where this journey takes us next." "Me too," she replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I feel like this is just the beginning." In that moment, I knew that our experiences had not only strengthened our bond, but had also set us on a path of shared purpose and fulfillment. Together, we would continue to explore, educate, and inspire others, all while nurturing the love we had for each other and the world around us. Ida for telling my neighbor's kids to stop picking my flowers. I, 34 Farads, live in a cozy little house with a beautiful garden that I've poured my heart and soul into. Gardening has always been my passion. I grow a variety of flowers, herbs, and veggies, and it brings me so much joy to watch them thrive. My neighbor, Tom, 40M, has 3 kids. Let's call them Lily, 10, Max, 8, and Sam, 6. They're generally good kids, but they have a tendency to run around a lot, especially during the summer. One day, I noticed that my flowers were looking a little sparse. I brushed it off as normal wear and tear until I caught Lily and Max sneaking into my garden, pulling out my freshly bloomed flowers to take home for their mom. They looked so innocent as they did it, and when I confronted them, they just giggled and ran off, leaving me feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. At first, I tried to be understanding. Kids are curious, right? But after a few more incidents, I decided enough was enough. I approached Tom one evening while he was out in his yard, and I explained the situation, asking him to remind his kids not to pick my flowers. He was dismissive, saying, "Kids will be kids. They just love flowers." He chuckled it off and didn't seem to take my concerns seriously. Fast forward to last weekend. I spent the entire Saturday planting new flowers, which I was super excited about. The next morning, I woke up to find that half of them were gone. I felt my heart drop. This time, I was furious. I stormed over to Tom's house, ready to confront him, but I found him outside chatting with some neighbors. I lost my cool. I shouted across the yard, "Hey, Tom, your kids are ruining my garden. I'm tired of them picking my flowers, and I need you to do something about it." The other neighbors turned to look, and I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me, but I didn't care. Tom was visibly taken aback and said, "Okay, okay, I'll talk to them." He seemed annoyed but promised he would address it. I went back home, feeling a mix of satisfaction and guilt for my outburst. A couple of days later, I noticed Tom's kids playing in their yard, and for the first time, they didn't even glance at my garden. I thought maybe my confrontation had worked. However, I later heard from another neighbor that Tom was angry with me for making a scene. He said I should have approached him more politely instead of yelling. Now, I'm left wondering if I overreacted. I genuinely love my flowers and put a lot of effort into my garden, but maybe I should have handled the situation differently. I didn't want to be that neighbor, but I felt pushed to the limit. I decided to take a step back and reflect on the situation. I didn't want to be the neighborhood villain, but at the same time, I felt justified in my frustration. My garden was more than just a collection of plants. It was a sanctuary for me, a place where I could unwind after a long day and connect with nature. Watching the kids trample through my flowers felt like a personal violation of that space. The next few days passed in awkward silence. Tom didn't speak to me, and I didn't want to initiate a conversation, fearing I'd ignite the tension again. Meanwhile, I tried to focus on other projects in my garden, but it wasn't the same. The joy of planting was overshadowed by the dread of the kids coming back to pillage my blooms. Then, one afternoon, as I was pruning some rose bushes, I heard the familiar sounds of laughter outside. I looked up to see Lily, Max, and Sam playing near my fence. My heart raced, and I braced myself for what was about to unfold. But instead of rushing to my flowers, they seemed to be playing a game of tag, weaving around the yard, staying clear of my garden. Curious, I watched as they took turns racing back and forth. Their laughter echoed in the air, and for a brief moment, I felt guilty for my earlier reaction. They were just kids, after all. Maybe they didn't fully understand the impact of their actions. After a while, I decided to take a chance. I walked over to the fence and called out, "Hey guys, what are you up to?" They stopped and turned to me, looking a bit sheepish. I decided to use this moment to connect rather than confront. "I noticed you're having fun. Just a heads up, I love my flowers, so if you see anything blooming over here, maybe we can come up with a plan so you can enjoy them without picking them." Lily's eyes lit up. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely curious. I explained that I could show them which flowers were okay to look at and which ones were not. I suggested we could have a flower picking day once a month, where they could come into my garden and pick some blooms ones I would specifically designate for them. This way, they would feel included without damaging my hard work. Their faces broke into smiles, and they eagerly agreed. "That sounds awesome," Max exclaimed. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Instead of conflict, I was building a bridge. Later that evening, I saw Tom in his yard, and this time, I approached him with a friendly smile. "Hey, Tom, I wanted to let you know I spoke with the kids, and I think I found a way for them to enjoy my garden without picking my flowers. How do you feel about it?" Tom looked surprised, but also relieved. "Honestly, I'm glad to hear that. I didn't mean to dismiss your concerns. I thought you were being a bit too harsh. It's nice to see you trying to make peace." From that day forward, we established a routine. The kids would come over once a month to pick specific flowers I'd set aside for them. They learned about gardening from me and even helped plant a few new ones, creating a sense of ownership and responsibility. My garden thrived, and I found joy in sharing it with them. It turned out that my initial reaction wasn't the best approach, but it did lead to a resolution I hadn't anticipated. Looking back, I realize I could have handled the situation more gracefully. But then again, sometimes it takes a little push to get people to understand boundaries. The relationship between my neighbor Tom and me continued to improve. The kids would come over for our designated flower picking days, and I even began to look forward to their visits. They were genuinely excited to learn about gardening, and I found joy in teaching them how to plant seeds, water the flowers, and care for the garden. They helped me pick the blooms I had set aside for them, and in return, I encouraged them to create little bouquets for their parents. One afternoon, while the kids were busy arranging their flowers, I decided to make some lemonade and snacks for everyone. As I was mixing the lemonade, I overheard Lily asking her friends, "What's your favorite flower?" Their responses were filled with childlike wonder. "I love daisies, and roses are the best." Hearing their enthusiasm made me smile. It reminded me of why I had started gardening in the first place. When I brought out the lemonade and cookies, the kids cheered. I felt like a host at a mini garden party. They giggled and chatted, discussing their favorite colors and which flowers they wanted to plant next. It was heartwarming to see them take such an interest in nature, and I felt proud to play a part in their discovery. Tom often joined us during these gatherings, and he started to share stories about his childhood. It turned out he was a bit of a gardener himself in his youth. We bonded over our shared love for nature and gardening tips, and it felt great to have someone to talk to who understood the effort that went into maintaining a garden. However, there was still the occasional hiccup. One day, As I was tidying up the garden, I noticed Sam had picked some of the flowers that weren't part of our agreement. My heart sank a little. I felt that familiar frustration bubbling up. But instead of letting it get to me, I took a deep breath and approached him calmly. Hey, Sam, I see you picked some flowers that we didn't set aside for today. Can we talk about which ones are okay? To my surprise, Sam looked sheepish. I'm sorry. I thought they looked really pretty. It was a simple mistake, but it was an opportunity to teach him about boundaries again. We discussed the importance of caring for plants and the time it takes to grow them. He listened intently, and I could see that he genuinely wanted to understand. Afterward, I noticed the kids were more careful about which flowers they picked. They began to show respect for the garden, and it felt gratifying to see the fruits of our discussions paying off. They became more mindful and even started helping with the weeding and watering when they visited. This new arrangement not only strengthened our bond with Tom and the kids, but also led to an unexpected friendship among the parents. I began inviting Tom and his wife over for casual barbecues. We shared stories, laughter, and our gardening experiences. Before I knew it, our neighborhood dynamic had shifted from distant acquaintances to close friends. One day, while we were having dinner in my backyard, I looked around at the kids running and playing, the flowers blooming vibrantly, and my neighbor enjoying a drink with my fiance, Jake. It struck me how far we'd come from that initial conflict. What had started as a stressful situation transformed into a thriving community filled with laughter and friendship. But with all this positive change, I couldn't help but wonder if I was still Ida from my initial outburst. After all, if I hadn't reacted so strongly, would we have found this wonderful solution? Did my frustration spark a series of events that led to something beautiful? Or could I have achieved this without the confrontation? As I sat there, watching the kids play, I decided that sometimes it takes a little push to create meaningful change. I embraced the chaos, the laughter, and the growth not just in my garden, but in my relationships as well. The garden became a central hub for our little neighborhood community. More families started joining our flower picking days, bringing their children along and creating an atmosphere filled with laughter and camaraderie. It felt like the garden was thriving, not just with plants, but with friendships as well. One afternoon, we decided to host a small garden party to celebrate the blooming flowers. Tom and his wife, Sarah, helped me with the preparations. We set up picnic tables adorned with colorful tablecloths, arranged flower bouquets in mason jars, and prepared snacks that catered to both kids and adults. The day was sunny and bright, perfect for outdoor fun. As the guests arrived, the kids ran off to explore the garden, while the adults gathered around to chat and enjoy some refreshments. It was heartwarming to see everyone getting along, sharing gardening tips, and discussing their plans for the upcoming seasons. Tom and I reminisced about the challenges and joys of growing our gardens, while Sarah shared her enthusiasm for creating herbal teas from the fresh herbs we had planted. However, as the party progressed, I noticed that a few of the kids were getting a little too rowdy. They began picking flowers without asking, their laughter turning into shouts as they raced through the garden. I felt a twinge of anxiety rise within me. I had worked hard to establish boundaries, and I didn't want all of that to fall apart. I took a deep breath and called the kids over. Hey, everyone, let's have a little flower picking contest. But remember, only pick the flowers we agreed on. The ones we're saving for later are still growing and need time to bloom. The kids cheered, excited about the idea of a contest. I quickly set up a few ground rules. They could only pick certain flowers, and whoever gathered the most without breaking any would win a small prize. As the contest unfolded, I watched the kids scurry around with renewed focus. They were careful and respectful, and it filled me with pride to see them applying what they had learned. The garden was full of energy, and as laughter echoed around me, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't anticipated. At one point, I caught a glimpse of Sam, who had been especially diligent about following the rules. He ran up to me, beaming with pride as he presented his flower collection. Look, I picked these just like you taught me. I knelt down and praised him for his effort, feeling a surge of joy at his enthusiasm. As the sun began to set, the atmosphere turned warm and cozy. We gathered around a fire pit to roast marshmallows, and the kids shared their favorite moments from the day. One little girl declared that the garden was her happy place, and I couldn't help but smile, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment wash over me. After the party, as I was tidying up, I found Tom sitting on the steps of my porch, sipping a drink and looking thoughtful. I joined him, curious about what was on his mind. You know, he started, when you first yelled at me about the kids, I didn't think we'd end up here as friends. I was really frustrated, but I can see now that it was a wake-up call for me. I nodded, realizing that the confrontation had opened the door to this beautiful community. I felt bad for yelling, but I think sometimes we need to address issues head-on for things to change, I admitted. I didn't want to stifle their joy, but I needed to protect what I had worked so hard to create. Tom smiled. You were right to stand up for yourself and your garden. It's become something special for all of us. We sat in comfortable silence, both appreciating the journey that had brought us to this point. But as I sat there, a lingering thought returned. Was I justified in my initial reaction? Was my outburst necessary for this beautiful community to form? Or could it have happened without that confrontation? I couldn't help but wonder if I was still Ida for my initial response. In the end, I embraced the complexity of relationships and the way they evolve. I had learned that growth, whether in a garden or in friendship, sometimes requires a little friction. And as I looked around at the vibrant flowers and the laughter echoing from the yard, I realized that every challenge had led to something wonderful. The garden flourished alongside our newfound community bonds. I continued to host flower picking days, and each gathering seemed to grow larger than the last. More families from the neighborhood joined us, and it became a cherished tradition. Children who had once run wild now approached with a sense of respect for the space we had cultivated together. One day, I decided to host a harvest festival to celebrate the end of summer and the bounty of our collective efforts. I sent out invitations to everyone in the neighborhood, inviting them to bring a dish made with herbs or vegetables from their gardens. The excitement was palpable, and soon the entire neighborhood was buzzing with plans for the event. On the day of the festival, the atmosphere was electric. The sun shone brightly, and we set up tables laden with delicious food. There were salads bursting with fresh vegetables, fragrant herbal teas, and desserts infused with the flavors of summer. Families mingled, children played, and laughter filled the air. I felt a sense of joy and gratitude for everyone who had contributed to making this day a reality. As the day progressed, I noticed Sam darting around with a group of kids. They had formed a small club dedicated to garden exploration, and I couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. I overheard them discussing which flowers attracted the most butterflies and how to care for the plants they had helped nurture. In the middle of the festivities, Tom approached me with a serious expression. Hey, can we talk for a minute? I followed him to a quieter corner of the yard, curious about what was bothering him. I've been thinking about how things started between us, and I want to apologize for my part in that, he said. You were right to set boundaries. I didn't realize how much my kids were impacting your garden and your peace. I appreciated his honesty. Thank you, Tom. It's been a journey for both of us. I think we've both learned a lot about communication and respecting each other's space. He smiled, the tension between us easing. I really enjoy this community we've built. It's been great for my kids and me. Just then, Sam and his friends ran over, proudly presenting their first ever garden project, a butterfly house they had made from recycled materials. Look what we built. Can we put it in your garden? Sam asked, excitement radiating from him. I knelt down, examining their handiwork. It was a charming little structure adorned with colorful paint and decorations. This is amazing. Yes, let's find the perfect spot for it. I helped them secure it in a sunny corner of the garden, and the kids cheered with joy. As we stood there, I felt a profound sense of connection to these children and their families. They had embraced my garden as their own, learning and growing alongside me. It was a beautiful reminder of the power of community, even when it had started from a moment of conflict. But later that evening, as I reflected on the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been the catalyst for this positive change. My initial outburst, while uncomfortable, had sparked a transformation. I thought back to my post on Reddit and how I had questioned whether I was the bad guy in that situation. Was I wrong for defending my space? For expressing my feelings and standing up for what I had worked hard to create? On the surface, it seemed like the confrontation had been a necessary step for growth. Yet, I couldn't help but wonder if things could have unfolded differently if I had approached it with a softer touch. In the end, I decided that my intention had always been to foster a space for joy and learning. Sometimes, even the most beautiful gardens need a little pruning to flourish. As the sun began to set over the garden, casting a golden way on the vibrant flowers and smiling faces, I found myself reflecting on everything that had transpired. What had started as a frustrating situation with my neighbors had blossomed into a beautiful community celebration. Children were laughing, families were bonding, and my garden had transformed into a shared space for everyone to enjoy. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that my initial outburst had set this entire chain of events in motion. Had I been too harsh in my reaction to the kids trampling my garden? I had expressed my feelings passionately, and while it ultimately led to a positive outcome, I still wondered if there was a more diplomatic way to handle it. With all these thoughts swirling in my mind, I found myself returning to the same question I had posed to my Reddit family months ago. Was I justified in defending my space, or had my frustration been an overreaction? After all, the garden was a symbol of my hard work and dedication, and I felt deeply protective of it. So, Reddit, either for my initial reaction to my neighbor's kids trampling my garden, or was that moment of frustration the very thing that allowed this wonderful community to bloom?